Charlotte Snow stood near the edge of the crowded audition hall, her palms slightly damp as she clutched her well-worn script. The afternoon sun filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. The scent of polished wood mingled with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the corner cafe, where hopeful actors whispered nervously. Charlotte's heart beat a steady rhythm of anticipation and doubt. Dressed simply in a soft, faded sweater and jeans, she blended among the sea of faces, yet her eyes held a quiet determination. This was her moment, one she had waited for with equal parts hope and apprehension. At the front of the room, a panel of jury members sat behind a long desk, their expressions carefully neutral, or rather, most of them did. One man in particular caught Charlotte's attention. Mr. Collins, the senior jury member, leaned back in his chair with an air of superiority. His trimmed mustache and tailored suit gave him an air of authority, but his sharp eyes scanned the room with thinly veiled disdain. Rumors whispered among actors painted him as an unforgiving critic who wielded influence like a weapon. Charlotte noticed how his lips curled into a faint smirk when others took the stage, and she wondered what his reaction would be when it was her turn. When her name was called, Charlotte stepped forward with a steady breath and began her monologue. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of her emotions, threading vulnerability and strength together. But just as she finished, Mr. Collins' voice cut through the quiet room. "Are you sure you belong here, Miss Snow? Your appearance and delivery suggest otherwise," he said dismissively, his words sinking like cold water over Charlotte's hope. The room seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Collins didn't just speak, he unleashed a volley of dismissive comments that echoed sharply against the high ceilings of the audition hall. "Your clothes are far too casual for this professional setting," he said, waving a hand vaguely toward Charlotte's simple sweater and jeans as if they were an insult. "And your delivery? Lacking nuance, lacking training. This is not community theater. This is serious work." A few jury members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none spoke up. Some exchanged quick glances, others tapped pens against their notes, pretending to focus elsewhere. The subtle smirks and soft chuckles from the waiting actors in the room didn't go unnoticed either. Charlotte felt the weight of every pair of eyes, some curious, most condescending, pressing down on her chest. Charlotte's throat tightened. She swallowed hard, feeling a sudden sting near her eyes that she fought to suppress. She was not a polished starlet in a velvet gown, and the threadbare sweater she wore had been a practical choice for a morning spent rehearsing in the chilly community center. But this was her chance to be seen, even if in this room of sharp tongues and guarded hearts, she hardly fit the mold. Mr. Collins didn't offer a pause to breathe. "Perhaps it's best if you don't waste more of our time. There are many others here who have spent years honing their craft at prestigious schools. You clearly lack the experience we seek." The words weren't just rejection, they felt like a public stripping of dignity. Murmurs rippled through the waiting room. Some students who had been quietly gathering their belongings now laughed under their breath. One woman seated near the back glanced around, her eyes gleaming with an uncomfortable mix of amusement and pity. Charlotte clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. The urge to flee overwhelmed her, yet she stayed rooted, unwilling to retreat from the room or herself. I understand," she said softly, her voice barely above the hum of whispers. She began to step backward, aiming to edge toward the door. But Mr. Collins was quicker. "Wait a moment," he insisted, his tone hardening. "You're not going anywhere just yet. I think it's necessary you remain here until all auditions are complete." His eyes locked onto hers, a cold warning beneath the words. Leaving now might give the wrong impression. Charlotte's cheeks burned. Humiliated, she faltered, unsure if she should defy the authority he wielded so easily. The jury members nodded in silent agreement, granting their unspoken approval to Mr. Collins' command. "I wasn't planning to disrupt," she whispered, trying to mask her growing discomfort. "I just thought." "That's enough," he cut in. Sit down. Reluctantly, Charlotte moved toward one of the empty chairs at the side of the room. The other auditionees glanced her way, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed judgment. She could hear faint whispers, perhaps they were speculating about who she thought she was, daring to show up in such modest attire among so many polished performers. Once seated, she pulled her script close to her chest as if it shielded her from the judgmental gazes and biting words. The siren call of escape, a chance to slip out the door, to vanish from embarrassment, was strong. But she was trapped in this room with Mr. Collins' scowl and the looming certainty that the jury saw her as a joke. As the next candidate was called, the room's atmosphere shifted to a mechanical, almost clinical efficiency. Actors took the stage, recited lines, and retreated, their faces unreadable. But Charlotte's mind was elsewhere, swirling with a tempest of emotions, shame, frustration, anger, and a strange, sticky kind of resolve. Why had she thought this would be different? Could she really be part of this world? She had worked so hard, years of voice lessons, late nights memorizing scripts, weekends volunteering at local theaters. Yet this place, with its polished veneers and cold judgments, seemed designed to exclude her. Looking toward the jury table, Charlotte caught sight of a younger member, Ms. Bennett, an actress turned casting consultant. Ms. Bennett's eyes lingered on her briefly, but there was no sign of intervention or kindness. Just neutrality, a barrier no less painful in its indifference. When a break came, Charlotte quietly slipped out of her seat and edged toward the exit, hoping no one would notice. But Mr. Collins was already standing, his gaze fixed on her. "Miss Snow," he called sharply. The word carried a weight that made other heads turn. She froze. "I don't think you understand the implications of leaving early," he said. His voice was low but firm, echoing the unspoken warning. "You could jeopardize any future consideration in this company." There was no room for argument. A few others nearby, actors, staff, even some jury members, watched the exchange with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. Charlotte felt every pair of eyes bore into her back as she retreated back to her seat, swallowing her frustration. Minutes stretched and the room felt smaller. Charlotte shifted restlessly, muscles tense, her script a tight grip in her hands. The performance had ended badly, replaced by public humiliation. She squeezed her eyes closed, willing the blush in her cheeks to fade. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Mr. Collins leaning forward, reviewing the next set of audition materials. He was unimpressed, evidently confident the evening was winding down without needing to revisit her. But just as she let herself breathe a tentative sigh, the head of casting, Ms. Wright, stood and addressed the room. "Due to a last-minute cancellation," she said, "we have an unexpected opening to demonstrate some teaching exercises with our auditionees." A murmur spread through the room. Whispers of surprise and speculation buzzed among the actors, many exchanging glances. Ms. Wright's gaze fell steady on Charlotte. "Miss Snow, if you're willing, we'd like you to take the floor." The room seemed to hush. Eyes fixed on Charlotte as if waiting to see if she'd crumble or rise. Charlotte's heart pounded fiercely. The humiliation of minutes ago still clung to her skin, but a flicker of hope emerged from the chaos. Was this a chance to change the narrative? Could she show them who she truly was beyond the surface? Taking a slow breath, Charlotte nodded, steadying her trembling hands. As she stepped into the center, the air seemed to shift. The jury's expressions changed from smug certainty to curious anticipation. The other actors at the edges leaned forward. For now, the mockery faded, replaced by a fragile moment of possibility. The question hung in the air: could Charlotte teach them all a lesson that none expected? Charlotte cleared her throat and glanced around the room, noting the skeptical expressions of the jury and the hopeful, yet cautious, faces of the other auditionees. She smoothed her sweater, a small act of reclaiming her composure amid the tightening knot in her stomach. Despite the sting of Mr. Collins' earlier remarks, she reminded herself of why she was here: to share her passion and her talent, even if it meant challenging the expectations imposed on her. Ms. Wright, the head of casting, gestured politely with a slight smile, signaling Charlotte to begin. The room hushed, the air thick with anticipation, tinged with doubt. "I'm glad for the opportunity," Charlotte began softly, then steadied her voice. "Before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that this isn't a traditional audition spot. Usually, candidates present prepared pieces, but I hope to demonstrate something deeper: how we connect as actors, how we listen and grow together." She gestured invitingly. "I'd like to guide you all through an exercise. It's called emotional mirroring." The other actors exchanged uncertain looks, but no one objected. They had nothing to lose. Charlotte continued. "We'll pair up and observe each other's expressions and reactions. The goal is to embody your partner's feelings without speaking words. Sometimes, the most powerful performances come from silence and presence." One by one, the room began to split up as Charlotte guided the others. Ms. Bennett, the casting consultant, eyed her curiously but said nothing. Mr. Collins sat rigidly, arms crossed, his eyes sharp yet unblinking like a hawk watching prey. Charlotte paired up with a young man named Mark, whose eagerness lightened the atmosphere. As they faced each other, Charlotte encouraged him to express a simple emotion: joy, sadness, anger, without words. Mark's brows furrowed, lips quivered, and Charlotte responded with matching expressions, her eyes reflecting his feelings. Slowly, the ice seemed to break. Moving through the pairs, Charlotte's instructions grew more nuanced, weaving subtle movements with thoughtful pauses. The group embraced the exercise, laughter and light-hearted teasing filling the room for the first time that afternoon. Even the jurors shifted in their seats, eyes flickering with surprise. Mr. Collins' rigid posture softened, though he still maintained his astringent gaze. When the exercise ended, Charlotte called the group together. "Thank you," she said, voice steady. "What you've done today is not just practice, it's the foundation of trust and authenticity on stage. Acting isn't about perfect delivery alone, it's about connection." Ms. Wright nodded approvingly, her smile genuine. "That was unexpected, Miss Snow. A different kind of showcase." Charlotte's cheeks warmed under the praise, a quiet satisfaction blossoming inside. Then, almost imperceptibly, Mr. Collins leaned forward, clearing his throat. "Miss Snow," he began, his voice measured. "Your approach is unorthodox, I'll admit. But I see potential in this methodology. Perhaps there's more to you than I initially gathered." The room registered this tacit concession like a crack in the armor of skepticism. Murmurs flitted among the other actors and jury members. Someone cleared their throat nervously. Mark, sitting nearby, whispered to a friend, "I never thought I'd learn that much by just watching expressions." Ms. Bennett scribbled a few notes, eyes thoughtful. Charlotte allowed herself a small smile but remained composed. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'm passionate about acting and teaching because I believe empathy is the heart of performance." The rest of the panel nodded in agreement, and even some of the waiting actors regarded her with newfound respect. At last, the day's auditions came to a close. The casting team excused the candidates, but Ms. Wright called Charlotte aside. "I'd like to discuss opportunities with you," she said earnestly. "Your teaching demonstration was impressive." Charlotte nodded, swallowing a surge of hope. The emotional roller coaster of the day, the sting of rejection, the weight of humiliation, felt suddenly lighter. As the hall emptied, Mr. Collins remained for a moment, his eyes lingering on Charlotte. Though he maintained his professional mask, a flicker of admiration briefly surfaced. Charlotte gathered her belongings, noticing the subtle shifts in energy around her. Some actors approached hesitantly, offering congratulations or shy smiles. Others avoided eye contact, perhaps reconsidering their initial judgments. Outside the audition hall, the early evening light hinted at possibility. Charlotte breathed deeply, knowing that in this moment, she had not just survived but had begun to redefine herself in the eyes of those who doubted her. Behind her, the murmurs of the room faded, replaced by a quiet affirmation. Sometimes, the greatest revelations come from unexpected places and the courage to stand one's ground. Charlotte stepped out of the audition hall into the cooling evening air, the city's pulse faint but steady around her. The staccato rhythm of footsteps and distant car horns painted an urban symphony that felt both anonymous and intimate. The weight on her shoulders, the harsh glances, the biting words, seemed lighter now, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment and a flicker of belonging. As she waited on the corner, pulling her sweater tighter against the chill, she allowed herself a moment to reflect on the day's events. To most, she might have looked like just another hopeful actress fresh from an audition, but that simple exterior concealed a life woven with complexities and rich experience that few could guess. Born in a small town, Charlotte's path to the city's theatrical stage had been anything but linear. From an early age, she had discovered a love for storytelling, initially through the dusty pages of old plays found in a local library. Yet, her family's modest means meant that formal training was a distant dream for years. To afford her passion, Charlotte worked myriad jobs, from waiting tables to tutoring youth in reading and theater arts whenever she could. Each role added layers to her understanding of people's stories, struggles, and triumphs. More recently, Charlotte had spent 2 years volunteering in underprivileged neighborhoods, establishing community theater workshops for young people who, like her once, lacked access to the arts. In these bright but overlooked places, she saw raw talent and boundless potential. The experience humbled and enriched her, teaching her that the power of theater wasn't confined to professional stages or glossy productions. It thrived wherever hearts were open to vulnerability and connection. This background explained her unassuming attire. The sweater she wore had been a gift from one of her students, knitted with care. The jeans were sturdy and well-worn from countless days spent on makeshift stages in community centers and school gyms. Appearance had never been her focus, authenticity was. Her phone buzzed gently, a message from Melissa, her closest friend and occasional acting partner. "Heard you rocked it today. I'm proud of you," it read. Charlotte smiled, fingers hovering over the keys before typing back. "Was tough, but I think I made them see me." The lessons from the audition went beyond technique or lines. Today had underscored an essential truth, that true artistry requires resilience in the face of judgment and the courage to reveal one's genuine self, no matter the cost. Charlotte's thoughts wandered to the jury members, especially to Mr. Collins. His initial harshness had stung. Labels don't come easily off. Yet, beneath his stern exterior, she sensed a man accustomed to control and convention confronted with the unexpected. Perhaps her demonstration had unsettled his rigid expectations, forcing him to reconsider what talent and artistry truly meant. Her gaze softened as she remembered Ms. Wright's warm encouragement, the quality of a mentor who recognized potential beyond traditional markers. It gave Charlotte hope that opportunity need not always follow a straight path marked by prestige and polish but could arise from passion, persistence, and authenticity. As the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows, Charlotte felt a subtle shift inside, a moment of transformation. No longer was she just the woman who had walked into a cold room and been dismissed. Now, she was someone who had taken control of her narrative, who had shown that knowledge and leadership could come clothed in simplicity. This self-knowledge grounded her. It reminded her why she pursued acting in the first place, not for applause or accolades, but to speak truths and connect hearts. Later that evening, as Charlotte prepared a modest dinner in her small apartment, a steady knock came at the door. She opened it to find Mr. Collins standing with an envelope in hand, his usual stern expression softened by hesitation. "Miss Snow," he began, clearing his throat. "I wanted to apologize if my earlier words were too harsh. Perhaps I judged too quickly." Charlotte regarded him quietly, surprised by the gesture. "I also wanted to offer you a place on the company's teaching staff," he continued. "Your demonstration showed qualities we should not overlook. The company could benefit from someone with your insight." A surge of emotions swept through Charlotte: validation, relief, and a lingering wariness. She accepted the envelope. Inside was a formal invitation and contract. "Thank you," she said simply, a subtle smile breaking across her face. As Mr. Collins nodded and departed, Charlotte closed the door, holding the envelope close. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but this moment crystallized her conviction that authenticity and perseverance could create spaces where she truly belonged. That night, as she settled into bed, Charlotte allowed herself to dream of stages not just as places to perform but as platforms to empower, inspire, and transform, both for herself and others. In the days that followed the audition, ripples of change coursed quietly through the theater company. Word of Charlotte Snow's unexpected teaching session, how she had captivated peers and jury alike with her empathy and insight, spread steadily, challenging the assumptions deeply entrenched within the company's walls. Mr. Collins found himself facing more than just private reflection. The company director summoned him sooner than he expected, the tone stern and formal. The chairman's words were clear without unnecessary embellishments: the company could no longer tolerate dismissiveness or condescension that jeopardized its reputation or stifled fresh talent. While no formal censure was laid out, it was understood that Mr. Collins' role as senior jury member was precarious, contingent on a marked change in approach. Though outwardly maintaining his composure, Mr. Collins' once assured demeanor bore subtle cracks. There were no more smug smirks when Charlotte entered the room. The cold reprimand softened, replaced with tentative nods of acknowledgement. The man who had dismissed her hastily was learning the price of rigidity in a constantly evolving world. Meanwhile, Charlotte's arrival as a new member of the teaching staff was met with a mixture of surprise and growing admiration. Her first classes drew curious students and seasoned actors alike, each eager to experience the approach that had so surprised the jury. Charlotte's sessions, grounded in connection and authenticity, inspired both individuals and the ensemble, kindling a renewed enthusiasm. One evening, in a quiet room backstage, Charlotte stood with Ms. Wright, the casting director who had quietly championed her talents from the start. "You've changed the tenor of this place," Ms. Wright said, a soft smile lighting her eyes. "There's a breath of fresh air now. And more than that, you made people see value where they only expected difference." Charlotte nodded, gratitude mingling with determination. "I want every actor to feel seen and heard, not judged by superficial standards." That mission guided her as days blended into weeks. She saw renewed confidence bloom in actors who had once doubted themselves, felt the subtle shifts in the company's culture as respect for diverse backgrounds and experiences grew. Her triumphs extended beyond teaching. The upcoming production offered her a supporting but substantial role, a chance to demonstrate her own artistry on stage. The invitation was more than a professional milestone, it was recognition. On opening night, as the house lights dimmed and the theater filled with murmurs of anticipation, Charlotte's heart thrummed with a complex harmony of nerves and pride. The costumes, the sets, the shared energy of the cast all converged in a moment that felt both historic and deeply personal. Backstage, she caught the eyes of Mr. Collins, who gave a slight nod, no longer dismissive, but acknowledging. It was an unspoken truce born of respect and growth. After the final curtain call, applause washed over the cast in a swell of appreciation. Charlotte's smile was radiant, the kind that speaks of battles fought, walls broken, and new doors opened. Later, at a modest celebration in the company lounge, conversations hummed with reflections on change, resilience, and unexpected victories. A young actor approached Charlotte, voice earnest. "I was so impressed with how you handled the audition and then turned it around with that teaching exercise. It took guts." Charlotte looked at him, humility steady in her gaze. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "But sometimes the hardest moments teach us who we really are." As the party unfolded, Ms. Wright raised a glass in her direction. "To Charlotte Snow. For reminding us that talent wears many faces and that sometimes, the greatest lesson is to look beyond the surface." Glasses clinked, and Charlotte's heart lifted. Reflecting on the journey, she realized how far she had come, from the woman dismissed for her simple clothes and raw delivery to a valued member of the artistic family. More importantly, she had stirred a transformation that reached beyond herself, touching the lives of others. She later penned a message on the theater's social page, inviting others to share their stories of resilience and overcoming judgment. Alongside it, a simple question stood: what would you have done in Charlotte's place? The post sparked a wave of heartfelt responses, stories of doubt shattered, moments of courage seized, and dreams reclaimed. Charlotte smiled as she read them, grateful for the community that had embraced vulnerability and strength. Before signing off, she added, "If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. See you in our next story." The message lingered, a gentle invitation to continue embracing empathy, courage, and the endless journey of becoming.